Hello everyone. I'll be presenting on the topic interpreting the relevance of prohibited and regulated areas for the case of centrally protected monuments in Delhi. So our main aim here was to interpret the relevance of buffer zones, and for that we have chosen four centrally protected monuments set in different urban contexts, different urban scale, and different fabric. Research methodology, of course, started by identifying the research aim, the literature review, research design based on qualitative and the case study method, data collection, combination of primary and the secondary study, analysis, results, and the conclusion. We'll be discussing it in the further slides. Then the concept of the buffer zone, first we looked at the official definition defined by the operational guidelines for the implementation by UNESCO, and it talks about it as an area or area surrounding the nominated property which has complementary legal and customary restrictions placed on its use and development to give an added layer to the protection to the property. We first understood the evolution of the concept of the buffer zone, which actually started from 1972 as introduced by UNESCO in the Man and Biosphere program, specifically for the conservation of the biosphere. And later it came on to the operational guidelines in UNESCO. And today it is a de facto compulsory thing to have a buffer zone around the World Heritage properties which are nominated. Uh, During the process of interpretation of buffer zone, we also analyzed various charters, various acts, and World Heritage Convention document, of course. So importantly, we got all these key terms like the surrounding area, the urban rural setting, the significance of the setting, historic areas, the terms like that. And importantly, the AMSR Amendment and Validation Act 2010 is important for this study because this is the National Protection Act for the monuments in India, which is Ancient Monuments and Act for the monument, and it defines 100 meters and 200 meters, the prohibited and the regulated area, where in the prohibited area no construction is allowed, whereas in the regulated area the constructions are allowed but with control regulations on height, FAR, land use, etc. And here is where the document, heritage bylaws document, is very important, and the whole study actually revolves around this. Then we also analyzed different urban planning theories and their timeline, and through that we could understand that there are few values that are important. So like it helped us to understand the urban heritage, how it moved from the building level to the urban level. And when we saw that, for relevance of the buffer zone, how the values are important. And what are these values? These can be spatial and non-spatial values, where spatial values is like physical, aesthetical, and architectural, and non-spatial values like social, economical, intangible, historical. Of course, this is not an exhaustive list. There can be more to it depending on the case. But for our case study, we felt that these are the relevant ones. Coming to the case study, based in Delhi, there are like 176 centrally protected monuments in Delhi, and out of that we have chosen four. So the basis was that different types of heritage we have trying to identify. Like the first one is Ugrasen Bauli, which is a subterranean architecture. And when we see the 200 meters around it, it's mostly planned with residential buildings, and high-rise residential buildings that have come up. There are few commercial buildings in the vicinity, and this is how the skyline of the Bauli is, where mostly the structure is below ground and only 4 or 5 meters is above the ground. Whereas in the skyline we can see that there are urban structures that have come up like around 60 meters. It has gone up. So next, we have Khairul Manzil and a Shesha Suri Gate, which is another different context of the monument with a large gate. And here again in the land use, we can see that there is another monument. The third case study will be Purana Killa, which is already there in the regulated area, because this is just, both the monuments are divided by a single road, the Mathura road. And then there is the stadium and residential in its vicinity. Again, a very planned area, planned neighborhood, and also having a very high security area because it has Delhi High Court and Supreme Court is in the vicinity. This is the kind of the skyline for Khairul Manzil and Shersha Gate, where mostly the buildings have gone up but it's little far away from the monument. Then in Purana Killa, we can see from the map that, how there is a green patch. So this green patch is actually the national zoo. And because of the natural features of that, pertaining to that factor and lake, most of the attributes or the values are really intact in this 100 and 200 meters. And within the 200 meters, we have the very famous Pragati Maidan, where the new Bharat Mandapam has also come up, which is kind of almost on the similar height of the Purana Killa. Then there is a religious structure, the Bhairav Mandir, and residential areas, National Science Center. And this is the kind of, the skyline that is there. And when we stand inside the Purana Killa, like on top of the wall, the parapet, the historic wall, then we can see actually Khairul Manzil is also visible. And we see that it is covered with a lot of green around it. So it's a monument stated or situated in a very natural area. And then for the fourth is completely different. Like it has a very dense urban fabric. So from the land use, we can see that, how the buildings are. I mean, the residences are all congested, and mostly it's residential and mixed use with residential and commercial. So this is the skyline where the buildings are all congested,ly surrounded by within the the monument. And then there is very important, the Humayun's tomb, which is a World Heritage Site, also coming within the regulated area. So we did a comparative analysis of all these four case studies where, based on the spatial values like the architectural value, the historical value, if there are any other archaeological heritage structures within the vicinity of these 100 and 200 meters, we did a comparative study and then saw that how varying the height of the monument is also, where there is one monument which is just 5 meters visible. There's another monument which is going beyond 20 meters. Yeah. So, and within the prohibited and the regulated area also, like the land use is so different. Like one area has a lot of institutional, a lot of residential, but then the Nizamuddin area has a lot of residential and the mixed land use. Yeah, then the height, existing building heights is also so much varying. The skyline that we saw is so varied. Then social cultural values is also varied, where Nizamuddin Dargah is obviously associated with a religious and a social, and people come there to offer their for the offerings and everything. Whereas a Bauli, it's mostly tourist centered because it's very near to places like India Gate, and embassy buildings are there, so it's high profile tourists who come there. Similarly, Khairul Manzil, Purana Killa, because it's very near to National Zoo, very near to Pragati Maidan. So a lot of local tourists come there. A lot of children, students come there. So it has a very different kind of a use and function. So with all these, we come on to the control parameters. So control parameters, we see that it's almost similar, where all the height restrictions are almost 18 meters in all the cases within the regulated area. For FAR, for land use, again, it is stated that it's based on the master plan of Delhi 2021. So here, what we are trying to argue or we trying to understand is that even though there is so much of variety in the land use, so much of variety in the street pattern, what is same is the control regulations. So with all this, we try to also understand that how can we really assess these spatial values or the non-spatial values. So there are factors, there can be tools and methods that is defining. For example, aesthetical value. So it like building forms is there, street network, use of open spaces. So we saw that how Ugrasen Bauli has a very different kind of a urban fabric as compared to Nizamuddin Basti. Similarly, some non-spatial values, historical and economical and intangible, and then these can be the tools and methods. So a closing argument is basically, like even though we see that through land use maps that, it is situated, each monument has a very specific attribute, but what is common is the 100 and 200 meters. And through our study, we understand that buffer zone as a concept is implemented through prohibited and regulated area, which has some spatial and non-spatial values, which can be analyzed through specific parameters, through specific factors. But what is happening is it is confined within those 100 and 200 meters. So we say that boundary demarcation should be based on these spatial and non-spatial values. So that is what I wanted to present. Thank you.